Hey, in this video, we're going to talk about musical cadences. They're useful when you're writing chord progressions in a song. Cadences with terms like plagal cadence, imperfect cadence, and deceptive cadence, things like that, they sound complicated because they're terminology used in classical compositions. And so they sound, like I say, more complicated than they really are, but they're not when you actually look at the music theory behind these. So let's jump in and see what cadences are all about. And by definition, a cadence is basically just a little sequence of chords that ends a musical phrase or section. In a song, chords are grouped into chord progressions, and each progression tends to end on what's called a cadence. And looking here, you can kind of think of cadences like punctuation in the written or spoken word. So in poetry, for example, if you had a line here that ends in a comma, and then a line that ends in a period, and then the next line ends in a comma, next line ends in a period, what these are in essence cadences. They're either incomplete or unfinished, like a comma, where they leave you hanging and leave it unresolved, or you have finished cadences, which are more like a period where they bring you to a stronger state of resolution. And there are four main types of cadences we're going to look at. There's the perfect cadence, the plagal cadence, the imperfect cadence, and the deceptive cadence. These first two are finished cadences, more like a period, and these last two are unfinished cadences that are more like a comma. So we're going to look at all four, starting with the perfect cadence. But first, before we get into that, let's look at the theory, the musical patterns behind these. And to understand chords, let's look at the seven chords in, say, the key of C, C major or C Ionian. And those chords are C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, and then back to C major. Now, the theory behind these chords, the way that they're built is using what are called tertian intervals, or intervals of major thirds and minor thirds. And you form each of these chords by combining every other note of the underlying major scale, C major in this case. So let's start with C major, skip a note to get to E, skip a note to get to G, skip another note to get to B, skip a note to get to D, F, A, and then A would skip a note and get to C again, and then the cycle repeats. So this is the underlying pattern of, like I say, tertian intervals. And this first interval is a major third. Then we have a minor third between E and G. From G to B is a major third. B to D is a minor third. D to F is a minor third. F to A is a major third. And then A to C is a minor third. So these are the seven main chords in the key of, in this case, C Ionian. And so what it sounds like in sequence is C major, E minor, G major, B diminished, D minor, F major, A minor, and C major again. So you loop back to C major. When I say loop, it's these really do form a loop. So it's handy to see these. It's handy to see these intervals laid out on a keyboard like this in a linear sequence. They form this wave, this undulating wave of major and minor thirds, tertian intervals. But an even cleaner, more concise way to look at these is to loop the patterns into what we call a circle of thirds. And we call it a circle because we start at C, go to its major third, then there's a minor third, a major third, minor third, minor third, major third, minor third. So it's not like a perfect round circle, but it's a loop. So we call it the circle of thirds. And again, this is Right here we have a major third, a minor third, a major third, a minor third, another minor third, a major third, and then a minor third. So we've got some major thirds in there mixed in with minor thirds, and these form a bunch of chords. So you can see here, for example, that we have the C major chord, notated by a Roman numeral 1, is a major chord. So if we combine C, E, and G, that gives us the C major chord, which sounds like this. And if we start on E and play a minor third and a major third together, E, G, and B give us an E minor chord, the minor 3. If we start on G and play a major third followed by a minor third together, G, B, and D give us a G major chord, and so on. So we have the C major chord, those 3 notes, and then we have the E minor chord, those 3 notes, and then G major, those 3 notes, B diminished, D minor, F major, and A minor. Together we have the 7 chords. Again, we're getting at cadences, but this is really important to see that in essence, these are the 7 chords looped into a seamless ring of harmonies that we call the circle of thirds, in this case, centered around C major as the tonic. So C major is the tonic chord here. Now, even though each chord is grouped, like you have a group of chords to make C major in this case, or we group these chords to make E minor, E, G, and B, or we group G, B, and D to make a G major chord, even though each chord is a grouping of 3 notes, we could really just say that each of these root notes represents the chord. So for example, if we have right here C, this could represent the C major chord. And moving from C to F major, and then F major to D minor to G major to C, and so on. So if we were to play that loop starting on C, it's C, F, D minor, G major, and C. We're just moving through harmonic space and representing each chord by its root note. This is important because now we're on the verge of seeing how cadences work, and we're going to start with the perfect cadence. So the perfect cadence is basically, now to reiterate, everything wants to gravitate towards C. This is kind of the center of gravity. If this was a pinball machine, then everything kind of wants to move to C. This is the lowest point in the circle of thirds. And so everything wants to make its way to C. C is the strongest point of resolution because it's the tonic chord, okay? So a perfect cadence is a finished cadence, meaning it's more like a period, to use the punctuation metaphor. And a perfect cadence is one that moves from G to C. So it's going from that dominant 5 chord, in the case of C major, key of C major, it's going from the G major chord to C major. So it goes from a chord of tension to a chord of nice resolution, a finished or perfect cadence in this case. That's a perfect cadence. The next kind of cadence we're going to look at is a plagal cadence. And a plagal cadence moves from F major, or in this case, well, it moves from the major 4 chord, in this case, F major, to C. So it goes from that major 4 to the major 1. That's a plagal cadence. So those are the 2 finished cadences. So we have the plagal cadence from major 4 to major 1, the perfect cadence from major 5 to major 1. And now let's look at the 2 unfinished cadences that are more like commas. So hopefully this punctuation metaphor is helping it make kind of sense. That C major chord, in the case of the key of C major, is like a period. It wants to resolve, the progression wants to resolve to C. to the major 1 chord. And so it wants to come to C, and you could get there from different directions. The perfect cadence comes from the 5 to the 1, and the plagal cadence comes from the major 4 to the 1. And now we're going to look at the comma cadences, or the unfinished cadences. So let's jump into that. And we have the imperfect cadence. So an imperfect cadence is not perfect, and it's not going to fully resolve to 1. What it's going to do is 5 is going to be the target, and we can get to 5 from a couple of directions. We get there from the 1, or we can get there from the 2, or we can get there from the 4. So all of those are imperfect cadences. So the target chord here in this case is going to be G. We can get there from C to G, or we could get there from F to G, or we could get there from D minor to G. So from 1 to 5, from 4 to 5, or from 2 to 5, and that 5 ultimately wants to resolve to 1. So it's imperfect. It's like a comma because it tells you you're not quite there yet. We're not quite done with this musical phrase. We're just at kind of a point of making our way towards resolution. Then the last cadence we're going to look at is the deceptive cadence, or it's sometimes called the interrupted cadence. And it's kind of like the pump fake of chord progressions, in that we go from the 5, and it sounds like it's going to want to go to C, and it overshoots the mark and goes to the minor 6. So in this case, it's going to be G major to A minor. So instead of being perfect, going from the 5 to the 1, that 1 gives us a sense of resolution. It goes from 5 to the minor 6, which is very close. The minor 6 is very close to the 1, and so it shares some of the same notes. This C major chord, in this case the major 1, has C, E, and G. The 6th chord has an A, C, and E, so it shares those 2 chords. So it's very similar to the tonic, and it's the relative minor of the 1, but it's not quite the strongest point of resolution. So that's why it's called a deceptive or interrupted cadence. So we looked at 4 main types of cadences. We have the perfect and plagal cadence, which are the finished cadences, more like a period. And we have the imperfect and deceptive or interrupted cadence. Those are the unfinished cadences, and they are more like commas. So using these cadences, different types of cadences, you can give your music a sense of cadence or flow, where it comes to points of almost resolution or full resolution as it cycles through different chord progressions throughout a song. So 4 main types of cadences. Hope that makes sense. And once you can see it with music theory, it's not as complicated as it might sound.